Hello everyone, if you did not know, I organized this year what I called a Booktuber Secret Santa program. Each Booktuber picked a favorite book of their person and are going to read it, or did read it at this point, and put up their review all at the same time, which is today. My Secret Santa is Victoria from A Musical Bookworm. I am so thankful. She's a great booktuber and an incredibly talented musician, but also I'm so excited because it gave me a chance to do something a little outside the norm on my channel, and something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, and my wife has definitely wanted me to do for a long time, and that is read the classic L.M. Montgomery story, Anne of Green Gables.
How dare you!
Now, as part of this, I'm going to talk at the end of this video a lot more about Victoria and why you should check out her booktube channel, A Musical Bookworm, so definitely check in for that. But first, let's get to this review, because I loved this book. The Malazan guy loves Anne of Green Gables. Yeah, I'm complex that way. This book is a ray of joy and sunshine on paper pages. I mean, it is delightful in every sense of the word, and yet incredibly thought-provoking and impactful. I had a spiritual experience with this book, both in a religious sense, because there is this very interesting dialogue of like Anne first coming into contact with ideas about God and church in a real way, but also just with like a spiritual existence with the world around us and how to be joyful, and what the character of Anne, like how she views the world and existence and experience, and that propelling me to want to in the same way experience the world and my surroundings. It's just such a great book. I loved every moment of it. I both read it physically at parts and also listened to the audiobook at parts, and both were incredibly enjoyable. And I know a lot of us out there, myself included, have had a horrible 2020 because of the pandemic, and then, you know, life is hard in a general year, let alone with a pandemic. If you haven't read this, or even if you have read it, I would recommend picking up Anne of Green Gables. It was so just a joy to read. There's no other way to say it. I finished it in like 2 days. Every moment I had, I was either listening or reading to while I was in this. So good, and I definitely plan on picking up the next one and any L.M. Montgomery that I can find, because she is just an incredible writer. I think everyone knows the basic plot of Anne of Green Gables, but if you don't, it's very simple. A brother and a sister who are older, they're in their middle age, sort of upper middle age. I imagine them in like their 60s. They are working a farm, but as they get older, they need some help, and so they send out to an orphanage in Canada where they live, in Prince Edward Island, for help, and they want a young boy to come and help on the farm, and somehow wires get crossed and a young woman is sent, a little girl of I think 10, who is Anne. It's just her living in this world and experiencing it. And I mean, that's not a really exciting plot, right? No one's like jumping out of their seat when I describe it that way. But what holds this together is Montgomery's beautiful writing, but also the character of Anne. She is just a joy. She's full of life and passion and goodness. And it's just her just loving the experience of the world and this new place that she's been put in such an incredibly innocent and yet real way. She makes friends, but also struggles making not friends. Delights people, but also accidentally offends people. It's just tremendous. I mean, it really is. The character of Anne is one of my favorites now in all of literature. I mean, that's not hyperbole, that's real. I told my sister-in-law, we were just talking about this book, she's a big fan too, and I said, I don't have children, but I imagine the joy people talk about with parenting, I experienced a little bit in reading this book and thinking about Anne as a child. There's just so much, you just grow to love her, and as I said in the intro, also to be challenged by her and how she views the world, because she's come from a hard place. She is an orphan. We hear about her parents, both of them have died because of sickness. She had horrible experiences in the orphanage. Those do affect her. It's real. They don't just gloss over that. And there is sort of a darkness underlying a lot of this. Not in a heavy sense, but enough to give her joy and her choosing joy the depth that it deserves. On the back of this book, there's a great quote by Anne. Looking forward to things is half the pleasure of them. And that's kind of how she lives her life, like just embracing the world and even the experiences that most often we don't embrace, like waiting and anticipation, and she recognizes the joy of that. So Anne of Green Gables is a wonderful book. But I don't want to go away without talking about the other two main characters in this book, because this book is a love story. It's not a romantic love story, but it is a familial love story. Matthew and Marilla, who are the brother and sister that are adopting Anne, or bringing Anne to Green Gables, the name of their farm. It is them falling in love with Anne and gaining a larger appreciation for life and their place in the world through their relationship with Anne, and her bringing joy and happiness unexpectedly to this family. Not that they were unhappy before, but that they didn't realize what they were missing and the love that is born between them. Marilla, in particular, I think goes through the most character growth and change in this novel. She's this really like not bitter, but just like hard, unemotional, practical to the core person at the beginning, and by the end, she's still that. I mean, she doesn't change completely who she is, but Anne has softened so many of her edges, and the love of having this daughter, or daughter-like, however you want to say it, person in her life makes her just this much better, more loving and accepting person as a whole. And they teach each other lessons. Anne learns lessons from her as much as Marilla learns lessons from Anne. And then Matthew is just this very simple man who worked a farm, and that's kind of his whole thing. And he, through this book, again, finds joy that he would never have and a pride in Anne. And it's this great juxtaposition, especially when this was born, of like this prototypical man's man who just finds immense joy in his daughter-like. They never really call them father and son. Obviously, it's kind of weird because they're brother and sister to call them mother and father, but she just calls them Matthew and Marilla, but there is that familial unit that is formed, and it's just fantastic. This book, you get all the triumphs with Anne, and you feel all of her struggles, but it's just such a great experience. I cannot recommend Anne of Green Gables enough. And like I said, what pulls all of this together is L.M. Montgomery's fantastic writing. She is a tremendous author. I wanted to read the first paragraph of this book because it is so beautiful. It's a single sentence. There are so many clauses in here, but it's so smooth, it's witty, it's crisp, it's vivid. It's just perfect writing. And so I wanted to read it to you just to give you a little taste and to bring you in, because more people need to read this book. More men need to read this book. This is not like a little girl's book or a female book. This is a book for all of humanity, and everyone should read it. All right, here we go. This is the first paragraph. Mrs. Rachel Lynde lived just where the Avonlea main road dipped down into a little hollow, fringed with alders and ladies' eardrops, and traversed by a brook that had its source back away in the woods of the old Cuthbert place. It was reputed to be an intricate, headlong brook in its early course through those woods, with dark secrets of pool and cascade, but by the time it reached Lynde's Hollow, it was quiet and well-conducted little stream. For not even a brook could run past Mrs. Rachel Lynde's door without due regard for decency and decorum. It probably was conscious that Mrs. Rachel was sitting at her window, keeping a sharp eye on everything that passed, from brooks and children up, and that if she noticed anything odd or out of place, she would never rest until she had ferreted out the whys and wherefores thereof. The whole book is like that. Just utterly a joy. I didn't say the ranking, but I think you guys know where I'm going with this. This is an all-time great, best of all time novel and book and author. Please read this book. So I want to talk a little bit about Victoria at A Musical Bookworm. She's a fantastic booktuber and, as the name implies, musician. If you are a fan of the Stormlight Archive, which I know a lot of people are, she has written original pieces of music and performed them on her channel about things like Bonding a Spren and the Stormfather, and They're just beautiful pieces of art. If you like Anne of Green Gables like me, the reason I chose it is it's obviously one of her favorites. She did a fantastic version of the Anne of Green Gables tag. She also participated this last year in the Annathon, reading through all the Anne of Green Gables books. She loved reading them growing up and now just re-experienced them as an adult. She has a bunch of great content and videos. Please go check her out. I'm so happy she's involved in the community. Thank you, Victoria, for becoming part of Secret Santa, and so I got an excuse to read Anne of Green Gables, and you gave me this wonderful experience. This is absolutely now one of my new favorites, as it is one of your favorites. So thank you. Let me know in the comments below if you've read Anne of Green Gables. I'm guessing not a lot of you have, because we have a big fantasy reading community, and this isn't like a big book in the fantasy community. You should read it. Let me know if you've watched this video and are gonna consider reading this in 2021, because I think you definitely should. It's short, it's sweet, it's fantastic. Join the Discord, like this video, share it obviously, and I did start a Patreon. Would love it if you want to support me in the channel to join us there. As always, first in, last out.